Hello and welcome to another edition of the Moving Iron Podcast. This podcast is proudly provided by Axon, helping dealers move more iron for almost 100 years. Find out more at axontire.com. Axon was started almost 100 years ago out of a passion for keeping agriculture moving. It's that same passion that drives them today. With a vision for a better experience for both farmer and dealer, they set out to create a better way to move more iron. When you partner with Axon, you get immediate access to a full range of products and solutions designed to meet the complex needs of today's grower. Axon carries all major brands and sizes of tires, wheels, and tracks. From custom colors and sizes to fully customized wheels, you can have the solution for virtually any problem today's farmer is trying to solve. To find more or become an Axon dealer, please visit axontire.com.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving iron, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. Markets with Chip Nellinger. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Axon Tire, helping dealers move more iron for the past 100 years. For more information, go to axontire.com. Also, if you are a listener to the Moving Iron Podcast, for the month of June, you get a 3% discount if you use the word combine kit for a set of combine tires and rims from Alliance there at axon.com. Or if you're talking to your rep, just tell them you heard it on Moving Iron Podcast, and you'll still get the same 3% discount. Also, TractorZoom delivering insights. Great place to go and check and see what's going on in the auction market. If you saw that last auction that Sullivan's put on with AHW, you'll know why you need to pay attention to what's going on in the marketplace. Right now, the auction values are at all-time highs, and this is just a good time to pay attention to what's happening in the auction, because as soon as that starts to drop, retail values will drop with it, and you need to be on the cutting edge of information. Speaking of cutting edge of information, I have got Chip Nellinger from Blue Reef Agmarketing here with me. Chip's nice enough to come on once a week and talk about what's going on. And, you know, Chip, you and I have been doing this for almost 3 years now, and in that 3-year period, I don't know that you and I ever didn't have anything we didn't have to think, within 5 minutes have a pretty good idea what we were going to talk about. And this week is no different, man. They had a Fed meeting. Fed put out some, bearish news, obviously, talking about inflation. A lot of money flowed over into the commodity marketplace, and I believe at one time yesterday I think they were November beans that were down about 79.5, and then before we came on, you told me that in the overnights they were up 54. So big swing in the action. So what is your reaction to all this mayhem that we see happening right now?
Yeah, well, that's a good word for it, mayhem, right? And on top of all that, we're in a weather market, right? You didn't mention that it might rain in some dry areas here. Now, so far, some awful dry areas in Wisconsin and northern Illinois got some rain overnight last night, but it didn't really amount to as much as was forecasted. It's so dry in the atmosphere, it's just not getting to the ground, and it's not as organized as what it needs to be. So there weren't some inch plus rains in that, but if you got that, you were pretty fortunate. And there's more rain in the forecast for some dry areas of the western Corn Belt, Iowa specifically, possibly parts of Minnesota, northern Missouri, western Illinois. That's early next week. And so these weather models have been less than consistent. And there's a tropical storm, bearing down on the Gulf, somewhere around Louisiana, Mississippi, that area. And where that's going to track is going to have some bearing on how far the rain reaches into the Northwest Corn Belt. So that debate would cause enough volatility. And then, this Fed meeting happened this past Wednesday of this week, and the reaction was to all these financial markets was really weird. And, they mentioned, inflation's here. We might have to raise interest rates starting in 2023. So, 18 plus months out. And you had some weird moves in the financial markets. Bottom line, there was just a tremendous amount of money moving. The initial gut reaction by some people and big institutions appears to be inflation's over. The Fed's going to raise interest rates. The dollar screamed higher because of the fact that maybe eventually we are going to raise interest rates. That's bullish the dollar. But in the same breath, interest rate futures signaled an immediate reduction in rates, and the stock market is just kind of flown all over here. So it is just a really weird time. Mayhem is probably, you mentioned that's probably a good word for that. I think some of yesterday's massive move was exaggerated by just a massive amount of money flow and liquidation out of commodities, because it wasn't just the grains. You had like gold was down $80+. Crude oil was down $1.50. A lot of the soft commodities, coffee, sugar, cocoa, got hit really hard. It was commodity wide. And I don't know that just talking about it, Goldman Sachs was out yesterday saying, hey, China tried this the other day, talking about we got to, slow this inflation deal. The Fed's tried it. Talking doesn't do it. And, according to Goldman Sachs, inflation's here to stay, and this dip is a buying opportunity. And so now you see it, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest moves. We had expanded limits in the soybean complex yesterday because of soy oil. And soy oil has its own fundamental story. It's probably topped. It had all-time highs here within the last couple of weeks, and it's having a correction. Was limit down the prior day. That caused expanded limits. July beans yesterday at one point were down like $1.23 at the lows. And so there's a lot of stuff hitting the market here. At the heart of this, we need better rainfall immediately in the Western Corn Belt. Southern Minnesota, Nebraska, the Dakotas actually still are on the dry side. Again, that moves into Illinois, Western Illinois, Northern Missouri. Some on tap for next Tuesday, Wednesday, but there's areas that are dry enough that like they need it now. And if they don't get it now and have to wait another 10 days, 2 weeks, even if it's cooler, you're irreversibly, in my opinion, cutting yield potential out of that. And at this point, I think it's a stretch to even think we can get 179.5 national average yield on corn, even if it starts raining. It is just that dry in a big area of prime corn producing acreage. And so, what I said there was pretty long-winded, it felt like, but now in the overnights, because these rains weren't as good in Wisconsin and Northern Illinois, very dry there as well. Not probably quite as dry as you move further west into Iowa and Minnesota, but those rains were a little bit disappointing. And now you have just a nice little 56-cent bounce in the overnight here in July beans after being down, I think, $1.18 yesterday. So we've talked about this volatility, and this is it. And the weather is going to cause this. If these rains next week disappoint, corn will be, right back north of $6 on December, and probably pushing into new highs above 638. And who knows, flip a coin, right? When you need the weather models to be consistent, the three main weather models are totally different. One has up to 4+ inches rain for 50-60% of Iowa. The other one has a ½ inch to 1.25 inches. Well, when it's 95 to 100 degrees, you're losing 1/4 inch a day out of the soil. 3/4 of an inch of rain might buy you a couple days, but it's right. Not making your crop for you if you don't get follow-up rains consistently. So we got the start. We're deep into June here. We got a real problem developed, and I'm not sure one rain is going to fix that. It needs to be a pattern change, and I'm not picking up that it's a pattern change. It's just one scattered event in a overall drought is what it looks like to me.
Yep. Yeah, out here they had a couple times where the amount of water they could push down the canals, they had to actually shut it off for, I want to say it was 7 or 10 days. But that was right during the peak of that. We had that stretch of 98 to 103 degree temperatures, and corn out here is about 3 or 4 inches tall. So trying to get that start and everything else, and then you shut the water off and give some extreme heat. There's it's getting pretty crispy, and they turned the water back on here yesterday or the day before, and now you see some, they're pumping the water to it, but it's going to be a challenging year. I mean, just if you take a look at what's going on and take a look at some of these evaporation maps and those kind of things that NOAA puts out there, and the term flash drought and those kind of things are starting to pop up in people's vernacular. So got some crazy things happening, man. I'll tell you what, there's just it is very this is kind of how 2012 crop year started out, was it not? Kind of had a pretty decent wet rain, and then kind of turned into this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's almost the mirror opposite, though, because in 2012 it started in the southeast and moved northwest, and this has started in the northwest, and now it's expanding southeast.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's maybe quite as widespread as 2012, but I think the thing that is maybe throwing these weather models off a little bit, and I remember 2012 vividly because I remember walking out of my office, it's 105 degrees, and it actually felt kind of comfortable because there was no humidity.
Yeah.
And this is the same way, right? It was like 92 degrees here yesterday, and you're out, and you're like, well, that's hot, but it's not the miserable. A normal June in Illinois when it's 82 degrees and 78% humidity is way more uncomfortable than when it's been 95, 97 here.
Right.
And that is a bad news for crops. And I think that's what's throwing these weather models off, right? Because I read on Twitter the other day that they're assuming normal dew points in these rainfall projections, and I'm picking up people are saying, yeah, I look at the radar, it's directly over my head, it's yellow, it should be raining. It's not doing anything. It's just because it's so stinking dry. The atmosphere just sucks it all up, and it never hits the ground. And it throws what if we had 78% humidity? Yeah, it'd probably be a nice 2.5-inch rain. But at 22% humidity, it doesn't hit the ground. And then once the sun comes up, it just you just watch the radar. That just once it starts heating back up, it just destroys any front that's moving through it. It's just gone. The rains just disappear once the sun comes up and the heat pops out. So, in 2012, what changed it was a hurricane coming through the Gulf, and that's what, kind of broke the drought, so to speak. That was in August, late August. I don't know if this tropical storm has enough power to do that, but certainly it's going to maybe cause some rains in some dry areas depending on the way it tracks. But yeah, it's so dry. Like I don't think one rain fixes it. It might buy you some time, and hopefully you get a follow-up rain somewhere down the road. But it looks to me like a fair amount of area, possibly southern Minnesota, portions of Iowa, maybe portions of Illinois, are going to not get anything. And it's not like we'll maybe get a rain in 3 weeks. You're going backwards and probably doing some damage if you miss rain this go round. And it's unfortunate, but that's kind of what we're dealing with. And so the markets, it doesn't know is inflation gone, or are the funds going to get out? You got an upcoming acreage report and stocks report on the 30th. The market thinks they're going to find a bunch of acres. Well, that's fine, but you're likely going to find them in the Dakotas. And if the Dakotas burn up for the rest of what's it matter if you planted 2 more million acres of corn if
it didn't matter if
they don't get rain?
Yeah.
So the market, that alone, just the weather uncertainty is going to push these markets back and forth. But at the end of the day on corn, we're pretty critical time frame. We need some way better rains the next 2-3 weeks, say between now and mid-July, or we have the top end taken off of this corn crop for sure. Beans, you can argue you could buy some time, but in some of these dry areas, I've seen pictures and talked to producers, and beans are a little rugged right now too, because they're just sitting there kind of withering in the heat and dryness. They can probably last a little bit longer, and it's maybe not as yield affecting right now on beans, but if this pattern lasts into July, you got some issues on bean crop as well. And down south, it's the opposite. I've talked to guys down there in Mississippi, Arkansas, that area. A week and a half ago, they got like from 12 to 16 inches of rain, widespread flooding. There's a massive amount of bean replant that needs to take place. And now they're trying to dry out. And now this tropical storm is going to give them more rain here the next couple of days. So there are issues from each extreme right now.
Right.
And the areas that are ideal seem to be shrinking a little bit. And that's not a recipe for record corn or bean yields. And it's tight enough that we need to see that happen. And the chances of that seem to be slipping away slowly each day. It could still be a good crop, but it's got to keep raining and cool down more than 2 or 3 days. It needs to be a pattern change deep into July, and I'm not sure we're quite there yet.
Yeah, a lot of weather maps aren't showing that. They're showing pretty much a prolonged drought, especially through the end of July. So, all right, let's talk about the dollar and exports right now real quick. China, irregardless of the price we've seen right now, China just can't buy enough of anything that they're looking for. So just a quick numbers here. So China imported 3.16 million metric tons of corn during May. That's 395% up from a year ago. Year to date, they've got 11.73 million metric tons, and that's up 323% above last year at the same time. I'm getting all this from my Pro Farmer report that came out this morning. So I guess, they talk about how they're going to slow stuff down and not buy as much, but they, again, just like normal Chinese rhetoric, you do watch what they do and not what they say.
Exactly. They have been a little bit quiet here for the last couple of weeks. Our export sales haven't been very stellar, but they usually aren't this time of year. This is a time of year things kind of slow down anyway. South America, Brazil is still kind of putting some beans out on the world market. So, but the take home to me is there's still positive levels. And this last USA report, the USA bumped up corn exports, rightfully so. We haven't seen major cancellations. They continue to ship out a large amount of corn and a fair amount of beans every week too. A lot of that going to China. And so there's nothing to say yet that they're not going to be there longer term. And in fact, the next month and a half, as you seasonally typically get out, you kind of exhaust the supplies out of Brazil, then that's when we see China start picking back up and starting to buy new crop beans from us. So we might be on the cusp of that happening. And this overnight, I would not be shocked with this limit down move yesterday in corn and, like you said, 80 cents lower in new crop beans. Wouldn't be surprised to see China step up and come to the table again and start buying. That's how they operate. And, they last week, some of this might be tied to supposedly last week, China said, hey, we got to stop some of this internal inflation. Any trading firms that are long raw materials or futures, we're going to kind of force people out of that. So some of this selling might have been that, but you can't, that alone does not stop inflation. I think that's what Goldman Sachs' point was when they came out with that report yesterday is you can talk it all you want, but once you start the fire of inflation, it's hard to put that out. And
right.
My point with that is, yeah, China might have been saying, hey, okay, if you're speculating in commodities or raw materials, we're going to force you out of that position. Well, obviously, that creates selling, and they know that. And it would be prime environment for, the state buyers to come in and say, yeah, we'll take some corn. It's 60 cents off the highs. Beans are $2.50 off the highs. Let's fill up the reserves again and buy a little more. So would not shock me if the next day or two you don't see some reports that China bought this dip in corn and beans.
Yeah, good stuff. A lot of things going on, Chip. You talk about it all the time, having that plan and how important it is. And and keeping that plan up to date and executing that plan. So if folks are working on their plan or just kind of up in the air right now how they need to execute the plan that they've got in place, what's the best way to get a hold of you and the folks over there at Blue Reef Agri Marketing?
Yeah, best way is just give us a call at the office. That's 309-550-7213. Yeah, and I would say having a plan, it works both ways, you know. I mean, if you have a plan of action and you're willing to execute that plan, this environment, there's no reason to stick your head in the sand and say, you know, be nervous or want to throw up because of this volatility, right? We've had pushes above $6 to make sales in corn, and then on the breaks, it's time to come in and you know, buy calls on those sales, or you know, if you didn't want the sales, you know, dry area, you push up north of $6, buy some puts. The volatility allows you to maneuver and create a great position for yourself, but you gotta execute on the plan, and it always comes, Casey, at a time when it's busiest, right?
Yep.
Farmers are out spraying, trying to, you know, a little bit of replant in areas, putting nitrogen on, side dressing. They can't focus on the market. So, point being, you got to have a plan, and we're more than willing to talk to you about how best to get that plan and execute on it.
Right on. Well, good stuff as usual, Chip. Thanks for being on the podcast, man.
No problem, Casey. That's it's going to get more exciting, I think, the next couple of weeks. So I guess fasten your seatbelt, because this thing's not over by a long shot.
Yeah, tune in next week, folks. You're going to have plenty of good things to talk about here. So
better than a soap opera, Casey.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. I am Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure you check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's where you're going to find the latest editions of the Moving Iron Podcast, as well as any blog posts that get posted. They'll be there as well. Go to movingironllc.com for the entire library of the Moving Iron Podcast and all the blogs I've written there as well. Also on the website, you will find the Moving Iron Summit. All the information there up in the navigation bar. Click Moving Iron Summit. That is September 15th through the 17th in Nashville, Tennessee. All the information for hotels, agendas, speakers, how to book rooms, how to register for the meeting, all that stuff is right there. So check that out. It's a great place to come network and put a name with a face. So with that, I am Casey Seymour with Chip Nellinger. Let's go move some iron, folks. Out. You want to have a meaningful competitive advantage to help sell more equipment. Whether you represent the sales, parts, or management department of an implement dealership, there's a surprising amount of complexity when it comes to tire, wheel, and track technology. Let Axon worry about that so you can get back to supporting your customers. Axon has leveraged years of experience to create a streamlined process that gives you a proven path to help today's grower and sell more equipment. The roots of their organization go back almost 100 years to the invention of the rubber tractor tire. Supporting agriculture is the number one driver of Axon, from product development through sales and service. To find more or become an Axon dealer, head over to axontire.com.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving iron time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving iron.